And, Father, we're going to get to the voting issue here in a minute, but we were talking a little bit about the life issue, abortion, and also euthanasia. Got a thought from Carol in Appleton, Wisconsin, listening to Relevant Radio 1050 AM. Hi, Carol. You're on the air with Father Simon.
Hi, Father.
Good morning.
I've been a nurse for 25 years. Most of my career has been in long-term care. I was a nurse manager for a dementia unit for a long time, and I have never heard the comment that a patient doesn't have any family, so let's just increase their medicine. In fact, the standards of care have improved drastically. We no longer use restraints. We take the side rails off of the beds because side rails are just something that a dementia patient sees as something to crawl over. We have, one-to-ones to try to keep these people safe. I agree that, it's an atrocity that we don't have better health care insurance. In fact, the number 3 killer in Wisconsin these days is lack of health care insurance. But, as I said, I just wanted to make a comment that I have never, ever heard that comment.
No, I thank you for making that because, one can tar with too generous a brush. I think the worry is that we will start saying that more. You do hear individual cases, and they're so sensational they make the news. But just a mile south of Wisconsin, you know what? People in Wisconsin, I find them pretty nice. They're good folks, and there is a strong tradition of respect for life in most places. I know, and I should be careful what I say because it's in general it isn't there yet. But one worries that it's going there. There was just a little thing about the euthanasia situation in Oregon. Wisconsin is fine. Oregon, I worry, So thanks for the comment on that. And let it be known that I've never met a nurse in that kind of care who isn't very loving of the people they serve. And that's the point. They're not alone. They're capable of loving and being loved. Even people who in dementia or people who are distant, there's still love going on, and there's still work being done in the soul.
Well, no, the problem isn't the nurses. I think the problem is this utilitarian view of life.
And probably more the insurance companies.
And we're seeing not only what's going on in Oregon now, but there is a referendum in Washington that's going to be voted on in November.
Washington State?
Same thing, an assisted suicide law.
Yeah.
So, we are seeing kind of state by state people wrestling with this question, and it really goes to the value, the dignity of human life.
Yeah, it does. Another point about the value and dignity of human life and abortion. I hate to keep banging away at that, but it is, to me, it is the defining issue of our culture. It has become the defining issue of our culture. That and artificial birth control, which are really quite related. But in Central America, before the coming of the Europeans, it's estimated by most competent scholars that 60,000 people a year were sacrificed on altars, and half of them were children. Tlaloc, the rain god, would accept only children, and they had to be crying when their hearts were cut out of their bodies. And so in order to ensure that they were crying, if they weren't at the time, they would be roughed up and then sacrificed so that the rains would fall. And when we think of that, we're just astonished and horrified at 30,000 children a year being killed. And people, when I talk about the human sacrifice, often get angry. I've been in the Hispanic world for ages, that somehow you're not supposed to mention that either, that really happened. And I hear things, well, what about the Inquisition? Well, it's apples and oranges completely. But 30,000 kids were killed for the economic well-being of Native Americans. We make people who did that look like campfire girls because we are sacrificing the unborn for our economic well-being. That's primarily the reason for abortion. I can't afford a kid now. It would be inconvenient. I work. What am I going to do? How am I going to take care of this kid? It's our economic life that makes us kill children. And the reason we're not talking about it is because it's so horrific. it's just so horrific. And I come from a German background, and in the town that my family came from in Germany, there were 300 Jews before the war, and there were 3 after. And it's not something people talk about until you get a few beers in them. Mm-hmm. And it's just, we're not talking about it because it's so horrible. And we who talk about it, we're just cranks. Well, the society is dying because of that. Our culture is dying. And, again, I've worked for so long in the Hispanic community, and there's so much talk about the immigration issue. The Mexican community is emigrating north because there's a vacuum. There's no possible way we're going to stop that immigration into a vacuum. The reason that our economy is sustained is because primarily Mexican people are coming up to do the jobs that we won't do because we don't have the people who will do them. We've become so used to entitlement that we're going to have 2 kids and a lot of money. And the Mexicans I have known still love their children more than they love their possessions. So I don't know. I get a little grim when I think about this. Well, at any rate, how's your morning, Beth?
Well, this is, as you said, this is the issue that nobody's talking about. No. What people are talking about are, certainly the economy's front and center now in the presidential race. Before that, it was the war. And can you help us to start applying an understanding of what the church is saying we need to do in the voting booth? I mean, the church is not saying who we should vote for.
No, we don't. But we don't say who.
But the church does try to help us to have a framework for making these decisions.
Well, to quote St. Paul's letter to the Romans, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That to say there is a candidate who's 100% pro-life, that just is not so. One party might seem to be a little better on the issues of abortion, another on the issues of war. But even those who seem good on the issues of abortion are willing to fudge a little bit, and those who seem good on the war issues, well, they're willing to shift the balance of the war. So what the church is saying is that you must look at the candidate and make your own decision about which candidate most accurately reflects your moral understanding. If there were, for instance, a candidate who said America must conquer other nations, well, you couldn't vote for him. If there was a candidate who said Americans must have abortions, you couldn't vote for him. In other words, if there was a pro-abortion party, well, we'd be out. If there was a pro-war party, but you put people's back to the wall, no one is going to say, well, I'm pro-abortion. This is unfortunate, but it's a right. I'm pro-Constitution. You're pro your interpretation of the Constitution. And no one's going to say, oh, I think that the purpose of our government is to plunder other nations. No one's going to say that. So you have to make a decision of conscience. It is still true that there is no candidate who completely reflects the Catholic position on the life issues or just about any issue. So you really have to listen to what candidates are saying and understand what is the most important thing. For my money, I'm not going to tell you who I'm voting for if I vote. I mean, it really is getting to the point that it's getting tough to vote. I think we have to vote, but it's getting tough. But for my money, as I said, I think abortion is the single greatest evil in our country since and perhaps including slavery, because slavery victimized people who at least could fight back in some way, whereas abortion enslaves and sacrifices people who are utterly incapable of their own defense, utterly incapable.